The blonde executive's scream cut through the air of the rooftop, a sharp sound of panic that silenced the business party. 40 floors below, the city pulsed, indifferent to the drama unfolding over the abyss. Emilio and Matteo, 4-year-old twins, were dangling precariously over the glass railing, their small bodies suspended over the void. A ball, an innocent chase, and now terror. The men in suits, anesthetized by champagne and multi-million-dollar figures, were slow to register the scene. "They're just playing," one murmured, his arrogance muffling the alarm. But Valerie Ramirez, the cleaning woman, the invisible figure in that environment, saw the truth with a clarity that only instinct knows. Her scream was not of panic, it was of action. While the others hesitated, she ran. Emilio was slipping, his little legs already on the outside, his fragile hands clinging to the smooth glass. "Dad!" Matteo cried, trying to pull his brother back, but the physics of gravity were relentless. And he too lost his balance. For an instant of pure horror, the two boys hung, suspended between life and a fall. Valerie reached them, a hand for each, the adrenaline giving her a strength she didn't know she possessed. The combined weight of the two children nearly dragged her over as well, her feet slipping on the wet floor. "Hold on, lady, hold on!" one of the boys cried, the fear in his childish voice an echo of the terror she felt. It was his son's cries that finally broke through the haze of alcohol and power surrounding Alejandro Herrera, their father. He turned, saw the scene, and his world stopped. He ran like a man fleeing his own death, his heart hammering against his ribs. "My sons!" He arrived at the exact moment Valerie was being pulled toward the edge, and in a desperate embrace grabbed all three, pulling them back to the safety of the terrace. The children, instead of running to their father, clung to Valerie, trembling. "You saved us," one of them whispered. "You're our angel," the other added. Alejandro watched the scene, stunned, a strange woman holding his sons with a naturalness that both unnerved and moved him in a way he hadn't felt in a long, long time. An act of heroism, an instant connection, and a father who rediscovers his own heart. What does fate have in store for these three souls who have just met on the edge of the abyss? If you believe in disguised angels and second chances, subscribe to the channel and like this video. Alejandro's reaction to that scene on the terrace had deep roots, anchored in a grief he refused to process. 4 years earlier, his life had been the picture of perfection. He and his wife, Julia, were the golden couple of high society, and the arrival of their twin sons was the coronation of a love that seemed unshakable. But the birth that should have been a celebration turned into a tragedy. A rare and sudden complication took Julia, leaving Alejandro with 2 newborns in his arms and a hole in his chest, the size of the world. The boys, his greatest blessing, also became a painful daily reminder of the woman he had lost. He loved his sons with all his might, but every one of their smiles was an echo of hers. In the years that followed, the mansion became a glass palace, beautiful on the outside, but cold and empty within. Alejandro, a man who solved problems with his checkbook, tried to buy a solution for his son's motherless state. He hired the best nannies, women with impeccable resumes and international references, but Emilio and Matteo, with the pure intuition of children, rejected them one after another. They didn't want a professional who followed a manual. Their orphaned hearts yearned for a warmth that can't be taught in courses. Every nanny who left was further proof of Alejandro's failure. He could dominate the financial market, but he was a complete illiterate in the language of affection. The rescue on the rooftop was the stone that shattered the glass of his apathy. It wasn't just Valerie's heroic act that shook him, but his son's reaction. The way they clung to her, how they called her their angel, awakened a truth he had been ignoring. What was missing in his home wasn't a qualified employee, but a soul, a genuine human presence. The decision to go to that simple temp agency in a modest neighborhood was an act of desperation and a break from his own logic. For the first time in 4 years, he was admitting that the solution to his family's pain might not be found among the elite, but in humility. The next day, Valerie arrived at the mansion feeling like an intruder in a world that was not hers. The grandeur of the house, with its walls of glass and marble, was cold and impersonal. Alejandro was not there to greet her. He had already fled to the safety of his office, leaving instructions with another employee. But the moment Emilio and Mateo heard her voice, the ice of the mansion broke. They ran toward her, hugging her legs with the pure joy of someone rediscovering a safe harbor. "You came! Dad said you would come!" they shouted. To them, Valerie was not an employee hired on a temporary arrangement. She was the promise that they would no longer be alone. On her first day, she discovered the depth of the boys' loneliness. Their room was a paradise of expensive toys, but the themed beds were empty. They slept together, in a nest of blankets on the floor. "We're scared to sleep alone," Emilio confessed in a whisper. "Ever since Mommy went to heaven, we dream that everyone leaves too." Instead of offering a practical solution, Valerie knelt down and offered them a secret, a tool for the heart. She told them that when she was little and felt afraid, her mother taught her to close her eyes and think of all the people who loved her. "Love," she whispered, "is the best blanket against fear." That night, Alejandro returned home, expecting the usual oppressive silence. Instead, he was greeted by a sound he hadn't heard in 4 years, the soft murmur of a story being told, punctuated by sleepy giggles. He followed the voice to the living room and stopped at the door, paralyzed. The scene he saw was one of a domestic peace he thought he had lost forever. Valerie was on the sofa with a sleeping son on each side, nestled against her as she read a fairy tale in a low voice. For the first time since Julia's death, that house didn't feel like a mausoleum of his grief. It felt like a home. The house was alive. However, the beauty of the scene was, for Alejandro, a double-edged sword. One part of him felt a wave of gratitude so overwhelming it almost knocked him over. This woman had achieved, in a single day, the peace he had been trying to buy for 4 years. But another part, the part loyal to his dead wife, felt a sharp pang of betrayal. Seeing another woman on the sofa, in the place that belonged to Julia, comforting his sons in a way he himself could not, was a complex and confusing pain. He looked at his wedding photo on the mantel, and the guilt consumed him. The arrival of his son's salvation felt somehow like the erasure of his wife. Regina Herrera, Alejandro's older sister, entered the mansion with the authority of a self-proclaimed matriarch. Since Julia's death, she had taken on the role of guardian of the family's legacy, a vigilant sentinel against anything that might disturb the order of their grief. Upon entering and hearing the sound of childish laughter from the garden, her first instinct was not joy, but suspicion. Happiness was an anomaly in the environment she had helped to preserve as a sanctuary of pain. Her eyes immediately sought the source of that dissonance and found Valerie, the unknown piece on the board, the stranger who, in a few short days, had conquered a territory Regina considered her own by right, the hearts of her nephews. Their meeting in the kitchen was a clash of worlds. Regina didn't greet her. She interrogated her. With the precision of a prosecutor, she fired off questions to map out Valerie's origins, to find a weakness, to put her in her place. "And you are," she began, her voice cold, "your first job as a nanny, I imagine." Every question was a test, a way to diminish the woman before her. But it was Valerie's answer about her late mother, a domestic worker, that provoked a strange reaction in Regina. A flash of recognition, or perhaps alarm, passed through her eyes, a quick and intense flash that Valerie couldn't interpret but which signaled that this conversation was more than a simple introduction. Then came the threat, disguised as advice. "Valerie, let's be frank," Regina said, her voice now a dangerous whisper. "My brother is a vulnerable man. His fortune, unfortunately, attracts people with certain intentions." The insinuation was a slap in the face, a veiled accusation that Valerie was a gold digger, a predator preying on a grieving man. Regina was drawing a clear line in the sand. She was the protector of this family, and she would not allow a nobody, a housekeeper's daughter, to get too close. The message was unmistakable: back off or you will be removed. The war for control of that family had gained a new and powerful combatant. The conversation with Valerie left Regina with the bitter taste of a memory she had tried to bury. The name of the caregiver's mother, Elena Ramirez, echoed in her mind, opening a door to a dark past. Driven by a terrible suspicion, she went to the attic of her late parents' old house, an archive of dust and secrets. Amidst forgotten boxes, she searched for a particular one that contained her father's personal files. With trembling hands, she found it, and inside, a yellowed envelope with the inscription, "Domestic Affairs, 1999. As she opened it, she knew she was about to unearth a ghost. The first thing her eyes saw was a black and white photograph. In it, a young woman with a sweet gaze and a timid smile, visibly pregnant. On the back, her father's handwriting, Elena Ramirez. Regina's heart raced. She quickly took out her phone and opened a photo Alejandro had sent her of Valerie. She placed the device next to the old photograph. The resemblance was undeniable, chilling. They were the same eyes, the same shape of the face, mother and daughter. The nanny caring for her nephews was not a stranger, she was an apparition, the personification of a chapter her family had tried to erase with all its might. A ghost returning to haunt them. Rummaging through the rest of the envelope, she found more than the confirmation of a pregnancy. She found a report from a private investigator hired by her father at the time. And, as she read the yellowed pages, the story she knew unraveled. The official report spoke of a seductive maid who had had an affair with her employer. But, between the lines, in the crossed-out notes, Regina found the truth that her child's mind had blocked. It hadn't been an affair, it had been a crime. Her mother, Elena, had not been a lover, she had been a victim. The honor of her family, the power of her father, it had all been built on the forced silence and the pain of an innocent young woman. Sitting in the dimness of the attic, surrounded by the proof of her family's sin, Regina felt no horror or compassion. Her mind, cold and strategic, saw only one opportunity: a weapon. She realized that Valerie didn't know the truth about the violence, only the supposed shame of being the daughter of a mistress. And that secret was the perfect ammunition. She could use the distorted story to poison Alejandro, to paint Valerie as the fruit of a scandal, the heiress of a woman who destroyed a family. She smiled, a cold smile. The caregiver was no longer just an obstacle, she was a ghost that she now had the power to exorcise once and for all. A dark secret, buried for decades, has just come to light. And it's in the wrong hands. If you've ever seen the past used as a weapon, share your story in the comments and subscribe to the channel, because this war is about to get much more personal and destructive. The Sunday dinner at the country club was the perfect ambush. Regina orchestrated the evening with the precision of a general, the smile on her face a mask for the cruel battle she was about to wage. Alejandro arrived with the twins and Valerie, and the scene of their happiness was, for Regina, the final proof of the urgency of her plan. The boys adored their caregiver, and her brother Alejandro looked at her with a tenderness Regina hadn't seen in him for years. She received them with a false cordiality, praising Valerie's work, weaving a web of kindness so her prey wouldn't notice the trap closing. The atmosphere was elegant, but the tension, for those who knew where to look, was almost unbearable. After the main course, Regina launched her first attack, subtle and venomous. "Valerie, dear," she said, with a tone of innocent curiosity, "you look so much like my father's side of the family. Have you never been interested in knowing about your paternal origins?" The question caught Valerie by surprise. "My mother didn't talk much about him. She just said he died before I was born." Alejandro, sensing the strangeness of the conversation, tried to intervene. "Regina, what kind of topic is this for a dinner?" But his sister ignored him, her eyes fixed on Valerie. "It's just that your mother, Elena, worked for our family a long time ago. Such a tragic story," she said, letting the last word hang in the air like a threat. Then she opened her purse and took out the yellowed envelope from the attic. She slid the black and white photograph of the young, pregnant Eleanor across the table. "This was your mother, wasn't it?" Valerie, in shock, just nodded. Regina then turned to her brother, her face a mask of false suffering, as if sharing a terrible burden. "Alejandro, there's something you need to know. Valerie's mother, she had an affair with our father." The lie rolled off her tongue with the ease of truth. "Valerie is the result of that affair. She is our half-sister." She presented the story not as a crime, but as a scandal, painting Valerie's mother as a homewrecker and Valerie as the heiress to that shame. The revelation exploded on the table, shattering the fragile peace of the evening. Valerie felt the floor disappear. Her identity, the memory of her mother, all pulverized by that cruel lie. She wasn't just the nanny. Now, she was the personification of a family shame, a dirty secret brought to light. Alejandro looked from his sister to Valerie, his mind trying to process the impossible information. Regina watched the devastation she had caused with a cold satisfaction. She had detonated her bomb. In a single move, she transformed the beloved caregiver into a walking scandal, believing that, by exposing the truth, she was finally protecting her family. The distant sound of the twins' laughter was a painful counterpoint to the world that had just collapsed. Regina's words fell on Valerie like acid, dissolving the image of her mother, her identity, her own history. Shame was a wave that suffocated her. Her first and only instinct was to flee, to disappear, to escape from the environment where her existence had just been rewritten as a scandal. With trembling hands, she stood up. I have to go," she stammered, unable to look at Alejandro, feeling guilty for a crime that was not hers. She turned, to leave, to run back to invisibility, away from the gazes that now saw her not as a caregiver, but as the living proof of a powerful family's shame. Regina watched Valerie's retreat with a victorious smile on her lips. Her plan had worked. She turned to her brother, expecting to find in him the horror and gratitude she so desired. But Alejandro's face was not one of shock. It was one of a cold, contained fury, directed entirely at her. "Sit down, Valerie," he said, his voice calm, but with an authority that made Valerie stop. He then turned to his sister. "What do you think you're doing?" "I'm protecting us," she replied. "Protecting?" he repeated, his voice dangerously low. "Or are you destroying an innocent soul so that your own pain has company in this hell?" In that moment, the scales fell from Alejandro's eyes. He looked at his sister and for the first time saw beyond the facade of a grieving matriarch. He saw a woman so consumed by her own suffering that she had become a source of pain for others. He remembered the small criticisms, the brooch trap, the constant manipulations. It all clicked. "This was never about our father, was it, Regina?" he said with a clarity that surprised him. "This is about you. You can't stand to see the children smile again. You can't stand the idea that I might perhaps find a little peace. The happiness in this house is a direct offense to your misery." Alejandro's transformation was sealed with an act. He stood up, walked to Valerie's side, and stood there, an unequivocal gesture of alliance. Looking at his sister, he delivered his verdict. If what you say is true, and Valerie is our sister, then she is our family, and we do not abandon family." He paused. "And if it's a lie, and you made all this up just to hurt her, then you're a monster. Either way, Regina, the person who no longer has a place at our table is not her. It's you." The reversal was complete. He had chosen compassion for the stranger over the toxic loyalty to his own sister. Defeated and unmasked, Regina left the dinner without another word, leaving behind a heavy silence. Alejandro turned to Valerie, whose face was a mixture of pain, confusion, and a small trembling flame of hope. "I don't know what the truth about the past is, Valerie," he said, his voice now soft, "but I know the truth about the present. I see your kindness. I see the love you give my sons, and that's what matters." He picked up the old photo of her mother. "Find out the real story together," he promised. "Not her version, but yours." This was the beginning of a new alliance, based no longer on a work contract, but on a mutual quest for the truth. In the weeks that followed, Alejandro's promise became a mission. Together, he and Valerie began a journey to unearth the truth. They hired a private investigator who, with Alejandro's help, found former family employees, people who had been silenced by fear for more than 2 decades. In emotional testimonies, the true story of Elena emerged, that of a young worker, a victim of a crime whose honor was destroyed to protect a powerful family's name. The investigation wasn't just about facts. It was an act of restoration, of clearing Valerie's mother's name and exposing the original sin that had poisoned that family for so long. As the past was being rebuilt, a new future was being forged within the mansion. The joint search for the truth created a bond of trust and complicity between Alejandro and Valerie that transcended their employer-employee relationship. He saw in her a strength and grace that inspired him. She saw in him a good man, determined to right the wrongs of his lineage. And at the center of it all, Emilio and Mateo, the 2 small anchors of this new configuration. For them, the house was finally at peace, filled with the constant presence of a father and the unconditional love of Aunt Valerie, who, for them, was already a mother. Regina's legacy was one of solitude. Exposed and abandoned by her brother, she became a recluse in her own bitterness, a deposed queen in a kingdom of ghosts. In her attempt to protect her daughter's memory, she almost destroyed her nephew's future and prevented her brother's healing. The poison she tried to use against Valerie ended up consuming her, leaving her isolated in her pain. She, who had everything, ended up with nothing, and Valerie, who arrived with nothing but her heart, found a family, a purpose, and the chance to rewrite her mother's story with dignity and truth. In the end, the cold, silent mansion learned to breathe again. Alejandro, who was looking for a nanny, found redemption. Valerie, who was looking for a job, found a home and love. And the boys, who had lost a mother, gained a new family, forged not by convenience or blood, but by the mutual choice to heal each other's wounds. Their story was proof that true belonging comes not from a surname or an inheritance, but from the courage to face the ghosts of the past together. For they discovered that a family is not defined by the blood you share, but by the truths you set free. A journey that proves that the truth, however painful, can heal and unite. If your heart was touched by the story of Alejandro, Valerie, and the children, subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. Let's celebrate the families that fate, in mysterious ways, manages to bring together.